Okay, so we start now the new session of the Merit School. Let me introduce the speaker of this webinar. We are very happy that we have together Professor Alessandro Paccagnella. The presentation title is Geopolitics of Microelectronics, Supply Chain Competition for Technological Sovereignty. A few words about Professor Paccagnella. He is a full professor of electronics at the Department of Information Engineering of the University of Padova in Italy. He has been the Vice Rector for International Relations of the University of Padova in the period between 2015 and 2021. In the scientific field, his research activities focused on micro-nanoelectronic devices and systems. He is author of more than 500 scientific publications, and he holds also 7 patents. Since a few years, he has been studying the intervening between semiconductor science and technology and geopolitics. So it's a very interesting title. We are looking forward to your presentation. Thank you again for your participation, and the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Konstantinos, and thank you to everybody who are here with me now for this presentation that I will give on behalf also of the other co-author, whose name is David Burigana. He is a professor of international relations at the Department of Political Sciences at my university. And as you can see here, it is a strange mixture between hard science, microelectronics, and the social political sciences, which may sound to some extent weird, but it is not, and I show you why it is not. So let me start from news, very recent news that we have heard and read, listened to during the last months, but I would say during the last years. As you can see here, we are in the middle of a chip war between United States and their allies, and China, Russia, and the other, say, in our group of countries. And this has put microelectronics and semiconductors at the forefront of a confrontation between the two world superpowers. And some titles you can read here are very qualifying. They come from important journals such as New York Times or TV networks such as NBC, or business communities such as Citibank or the Chinese South China Morning Post newspaper. And so there is a strong link, strong connection between semiconductors, microelectronics, if you want, and the political crisis that we are living these years. And this comes because electronics and microelectronics, it's at the basis of our world. This is an upside-down triangle or pyramid, as you like, where you may find some interesting point. On the bottom, you may see here the material part, and then semiconductor. This is a projection taken from 6-7 years ago, but it's very consistent also with the frame these days. And you can see that at the bottom we have semiconductors and our electronic components, and then on a larger scale, electronic boards. And you can see that the budget here increases by a factor of 5 or 6. And then from electronic boards, we go to the total electronic equipment, which can be divided into parts with standalone electronics, which accounts for about 1 trillion euros, and the embedded electronics, which is another 1 trillion euros, more or less. The first one concerning PC, telecoms, audio, and video. The second one concerning auto, industrial, medical, aerospace, defense, and security. And then this is the basis of our society, if you like, because this forms the technological platform on which telecom communication, transportation, installation, so is taking place. So telecom operators, internet, IT, cloud, artificial intelligence are all based on this part, which is based on this part, which is based in turn on this part. And the total amount of budget which can be accounted for, take into account this triangle, is about 1/2 of the world GDP. So really a big chunk of the world economy is dependent on a relatively small amount of materials and a relatively small market, which is semiconductors and other electronic components. As we are in Europe, and we are part of this school, and I'm very grateful to the organizers for a very kind invitation. And let's have a look at the role of Europe in these different segments. If you look at the market providers, you can see that actually Europe is not behaving bad, because it accounts for about 20% of the world part of the world economy in this field. And also in this field, industrial or area, defense, security, automotive, we are about 20%. Not so well in case of standalone electronics, but good in case of embedded. In case of a total electronic equipment, we are still about 14%. Where things go not so well is here, when we are talking about semiconductors, and we are talking about the production of the chips that we use every day in every instances, which is what our commissioner, Thierry Breton, who is the commissioner for internal market of the European Union, noticed on September 15, 2021, about 3 years ago. And he stated some important things, and there is a long speech, but I will come to what I have underlined in yellow, the situation that starts with the sentence, the world is short of semiconductors. And it is not only about supply and demand, because semiconductors are at the center of strong geostrategic interests and at the core of a global technological race. And it is important to notice that, this is in red, superpowers are keen to secure their supply in the most advanced chips, as they are well aware that it will condition their capacity to act and drive digital transformation. Please notice that there are 3 descriptions, and the first one is militarily, then economically, then industrially. And we know these days how important, unfortunately, dramatically, tragically, is for us this aspect that we cannot underestimate. The value of the chips and semiconductor supply chain is being recognized also by the Council, the European Council of the European Union, in a statement stating something that I would like to underline, even though I think that it is known to everybody. Chips, microelectronic chips, are fundamental in everyday life, work, educate, entertain, and also for households. It's fundamental for critical applications, such as in cars, but I would say also in trains, in trucks, in buses, in planes, in healthcare, and for key infrastructure, such as energy, mobility, data, and communication. And let me add also artificial intelligence. And in fact, this is noticed here because they are essential for green energy, the switching towards a greener world that we are facing, the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, high-performance computing platforms. And this tale has a birthday, which is December 1947, when the first transistor was invented by these 2 gentlemen at the Bell Labs. And when we talk about Bell Labs, it was the Bell Telephone Laboratories in New Jersey, United States, the East Coast of the US. It was December 47. These 2 gentlemen, John Bardeen and Walter Bertain, in a group led by William Shapley, invented the transistor. And this is a later figure summarizing the structure of a very primitive first transistor, who demonstrated that some amplification may occur at a solid state level. Before it, only vacuum tubes were able to perform amplification, and this was one of a real breakthrough. Let me say also fantastic invention in the history of mankind. Commercialization started, but really was not a big success. This type of point contact device, we had to wait until William Shockley invented the bipolar junction transistor, the bipolar transistor, which then became the bipolar junction transistor that we use still today. And they were used, first of all, for aid, for hearing aid, but we had to wait for the breakthrough. The breakthrough was proposed by these two gentlemen from Japan, Akio Morita and Masaru Ibuka. And they were traveling in the US in 1952, and they were two physicists, and they found that there was something new taking place. The transistor, something that really could disrupt the market and the society. And this is what they did. They were not the first to propose the portable radio, but their product was a real success. It was cheaper than the American counterpart. It was handy. It was proposed in 4 colors, and it was easy to use. And the portable radio became the first mass production involving transistors, which I mean millions of transistors were produced just for this type of application, a real killer application. Japan was badly and dramatically defeated by the 2 nuclear explosions in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945. In 1959, Japan was already the first producer of germanium transistor worldwide, and at the beginning of the 60s, last century, it was the first producer also of silicon transistors. So the industrial capability of Japan and the technological advancement, the quality of the research they make was already in place after the dramatic conclusion of the Second World War, just 10 years after it. So it was this small object was a huge economic, social, scientific impact, which took advantage of the fact that many millions of young people were looking forward to have something to listen to, rock and roll music, with some money, to buy something to enjoy life, and to not to think about what happened in the bloody years of the Second World War and also the Korean Wars. Things evolved. This gentleman invented not also portable radios, but also portable TV, which was not a success, even though these days now we have a portable TV in our handheld smartphone. And this was a big application, but transistors were also used by in other applications. And one disrupting application was the computer. And the silicon bipolar transistor 2N709 developed by Fairchild was actually ordered to Fairchild by the CDC Corporation, the Control Data Corporation, and it became the first silicon transistor to exceed germanium speed in July 1961. This transistor had the specs that allow to build a powerful computer, the CDC 6600. It was a first successful supercomputer, and it was better than the previous IBM 7030 computer by a factor of 3. And it has been the world's fastest supercomputer from 1964 to 1969. And then the CDC 7600 arrived, got the first position. Please notice a couple of things. First one is that the first CDC 6600 were delivered in 1965 to federal laboratories, the Livermore and Los Alamos laboratories in the US. Then others followed, and at least 100 of these devices were delivered in total. This is a typical picture coming from 60s of the 20th century, but polite, shining, and showing this big block of computing power formed by about 6,000 modules, each one containing about 64 silicon transistors. This means that 300, 400,000 silicon transistors were soldered in these modules. It was a big enterprise, but this it was a big effort, also in terms of reliability. Something took place in the meanwhile. Let me just jump for a second to the past history, because the big computers look back into Colossus, here it is, and ENIAC. This was designed and realized in the UK in 1943, and ENIAC in the US in 1945. And they were powerful computers, but most powerful computers by that time, whose performance was based on vacuum tubes. Curiously, Soviet Union did not understand the relevance of supercomputers, and there was a sort of ideological stop to implement supercomputers. The number of supercomputers was very low in Soviet Union, just a few, when their number was more than 1,000 in the US. It was just a cartoon showing the ideological approach, which was eventually overcome when Joseph Stalin died in 1953. But, as I told you earlier, something was knocking over the door, and it was the invention of integrated circuits. And it was invented by Jack Kilby, who worked at the Army Lab, so something coming from the experience of the world, working for the federal agency and for a federal institution. Then he moved in the summer of 1958 to work at Texas Instruments, and in September he came out with these again very primitive sample of the first integrated circuit. Again, it was on germanium, and but it was an astonishing breakthrough. The three inventors of the transistors got the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1956. Jack Kilby got the Nobel Prize in Physics in the year 2000 for his invention. And it became something really innovative but risky. And you can see here how much was the role of the federal agencies in buying this new technology, transistors and integrated circuits. The evolution of a transistor semiconductor market pushes toward big growth, but the percentage of the sale due to the US government was still high at the end of the 60s, about 30%, and even higher when we look at integrated circuits. It was a new technology, it was expensive, it was something not immediately available for commercial use. And in fact, the NASA Apollo program has been the largest single consumer of integrated circuits between 1961 and 1965. This again means that there was a big start in the US, there was a strong support from governmental agencies, to support this innovation. And now, in this very fast run across the history of microelectronics, we arrive in 1971, where the first commercial microprocessor, the Intel 4004, was launched on the market. It contained about 2,300 transistors with a silicon gate technology proposed by Federico Faggin. And I'm glad to quote this gentleman who is still alive, who was born in Vicenza in Italy and got the laureate, the physics laureate at the University of Padua. Then he emigrated in California, and he was a very successful researcher and entrepreneur. Microprocessor means, here is a picture of the lid, the chip, and here is the package, dwelling line package containing the first Intel chip, 4004. Microprocessor means powerful computation, easy, with a small size and chip. And in fact, this cartoon by Intel claims that the 4004 was announcing a new era of integrated electronics because it was, and it is, a microprogrammable computer on a chip. We were ready to use these chips for some application that we use every day. I'm using it today to talk with you. The home computer, the portable computer, and the IBM PC was launched 10 years later. And these marked a real revolution, economic, social, political revolution, because it was ushering the communication and information society. Please notice that in the same year, another microprocessor, which actually was a set of chips manufactured by American Microsystem, was already flying aboard the F-14 Tomcat fighter. And this means that there was a strong support by federal government to develop this type of application. But we knew about this only 25 years later. In the 70s, the world was divided in two big blocks facing each other, the American-led bloc and the Soviet Union-led bloc. And the Soviet Union understood that microprocessors could be something changing the roles of the game, and we started to copy basically the chips developed in the US. And you can see here the Intel, the Motorola, the Zilog, again, Motorola, and the copy of the American chips arrived with some years of delay. And it was a bad period, bad decade for the United States due to the withdrawal from Vietnam, the Watergate scandal, and the Nixon's resignation. There was also in 1973 the Cold War. But this looks like something that is not so unfamiliar these days, because after 50 years, in 2023, we have another big war started in the Middle East, and not yet, unfortunately, PC5. If information about the Soviet American products, they were very similar, but let me underline one difference. Here is the Intel, and here is the no industry mark, but just it is quoted Dielano, the SSSR, which means made in the Soviet Union. In a few years, the power, the technological, scientific power of American industries were not more reachable by industries of the Soviet bloc, and this marked a substantial defeat of the Soviet bloc in terms of advanced technologies. How could these be reached? This is a paper from CIA stating basically that you see here in production integrated circuits in 1973, and it was dominated by the United States, then Japan, the Western Europe, and the Soviet Union, just 4%. How was achieved this goal of keeping Soviet Union production solo in the field of microprocessors and integrated circuits? And this is a very important line, which is international embargo of semiconductor production technology and equipment. This means that by applying these rules, Soviet progress in the development of a large and technological advanced semiconductor industry will remain slow. And despite occasional diversions, the embargo has been generally effective in denying Soviet Union access to advanced production technology. And these, as I told you, hold true until the Soviet Union collapsed in 1990, 91. But in the meantime, something took place, which is the formation of the Semiconductor Industry Association in the US, seeking to strengthen US leadership of semiconductor by working with whom? With the Congress, with administration, and other key industry stakeholders. And you see here how important it was a relation between industry and institutions to support the development of semiconductor and microelectronic industries, and to keep the adversary, the enemy, at a delayed stage. And this led to the formation of a national technology roadmap of semiconductor, and eventually the international technology roadmap of semiconductor, which led the way, paved the way for the development of the semiconductor industry in the international level, in particular in the Western Bloc. In the 70s, we have another important thing taking place, which is the second statement of Moore's law. The number of transistors on integrated circuit will double every 2 years, every 24 months. As you can see here we have a log-lean plot, and the number of transistors has scaled from a couple of thousand with the first microprocessor of Intel 2004 to how much? Well, now we have more than 100 billion transistors in a single chip for the most advanced digital chips produced these days. And this led the evolution of our society from the transistor radio to the mini computer, to the internet, to the mobile, and now to our era, which is the 5G or artificial intelligence era. Few words about the main players. As you can see here, reported here, the worldwide semiconductor sale leader in at different years. And let's focus on a few years, 90, 2000, 2011. In 90, we were in the full American crisis. 6 Japanese industries were at the top, then 3 American, 1 European. In 1998, the TRS was launched. In the year 2000, well, it was the golden age of European industries. 3 Japanese, 3 American, 3 Europeans. ST, Infineon, Philips, which is now called NXP. In 2003, China joined WTO, and it was a big change. Big expectations were coming, but things were not going as really expected. In 2011, the fate of European industry was not as brilliant as in the year 2000, and we see here the appearance of Korean, Japanese, 1 European, 5 US, but 2 of them are fabless. Actually, we see here that Qualcomm and Broadcom are industries taking care only of designing the chips, not producing the chips, as in case of integrated device manufacturer, which take care of designing the chips and producing them, also packaging to a certain extent, such as Intel, Samsung, Toshiba, Texas, or ST in case, or Infineon in case of Europe. But there is another thing that I want to underline, which is an asymmetry, because if we look at other figures that I report here, we look at the presence of American troops in the different countries. And you see Infineon is Germany, ST is Italian, French, then Japanese, then South Korean. You can see here how many American troops were located and are still located. I have the last figures in the other countries, and countries producing semiconductors at top level. So this means that there is a political imbalance and strategic imbalance between these countries, Japan, Germany, Korea, Italy, and the United States. We rely on the American army to defend ourselves. Few words about the evolution of industry. DRAMs, we have gigabits of DRAMs in our phone, in our computer, in our tablet. It's the DRAM is everywhere. It accounts for about 15%, 20% of the whole semiconductor market. And you can see here that we started with the American era. The DRAM was invented in the US. When there was the collapse from A16, the number of foundries producing DRAMs in the United States collapsed to only 3 in the early 90s. And this was the big success of Japan. And then Korea arrived. And it is still dominating the market. What about Europe? Well, Europe started actually and spun off an industry from Siemens, and the name was Qimonda, dedicated for the creation of memories, and it was 2006. Unfortunately, the market for the memory, the market for the memory is really bouncing up and down, and it was a down period, so it was a bad period. And after a couple of years, Qimonda was sentenced bankrupt, and it was closed down. So Europe lost the capability of producing chips in case of DRAMs. And now the market is dominated by Samsung, SK Hynix, and to some degree about 1/4 Micron in the US. The big success of Europe that we talked about earlier here was very much due to the fact that in this decade, the first frame program, the Esprit program, the Eureka program were launched, and Europe invested a lot of money on semiconductors. Then attention declined, and figures were not so successful, even though 25 years ago, some people, and here report some sentences, stated that semiconductors are really relevant to our work. Semiconductors would seem to be the embodiment of a central tension that exists in our system of technology of trade. And here there is another scholar, Alan Tonelson, stating that failure to develop adequate public policy responses to globalized capital and technology flows will have staggering economical, social, and political implications that few are thinking about systematically today. So 25 years ago, somebody stated that it was important to think about the support that the government should give to semiconductors. And semiconductors, in fact, has experienced a growth which is, let's say, about 10% per year, more or less, a little bit less perhaps, but definitely increasing. And this year is expected to bounce back and to reach a figure close to $600 billion for the current year. And if we look now at the situation at the beginning of this decade, we see that things have changed dramatically. In the first 5 positions were Samsung, SK Hynix from South Korea, Intel, Microelectronics from the US, and this new player about which everybody is talking today, TSMC from Taiwan. And it was a very important step made by Taiwanese government to support this industry. But what about Europe? Well, Europe stays here, ST, Infineon, and NXP. Japan is not flourishing, is here. And you can see here with number 2, a lot of industries which rely on somebody producing the chips because they take care only of designing the chip. And this is a big effort, a big push to the development and the growth of TSMC. TSMC was founded by Morris Chang in Taiwan in 1987. Please notice that it is the same year when the martial law ended in Taiwan. So it was really the opening of a new market, the opening of a new era. We started with a relatively old technology, but very soon they were capable reach the evolution of the technology nodes, and they are leading the technological nodes that they are now produced at the 2 nanometer scale in this company, TSMC, and in Samsung. Intel is a little bit delayed. And what about China? Well, China was very wise because they invested, the People's Republic of China, I mean, invested a lot of money to develop their own semiconductor industry. President Xi Jinping is an engineer, so he's aware of the technological relevance of many products, and he is focused on semiconductors, on one of the fundamental products to gain independence, relative independence, but to important degree independence for his country. You can see here, if we look at the beginning of the century, Europe had a 20% share of the market, the same about US, and China was just showing up. But now China has gained important part of the market, and Europe has declined dramatically, less than 10% of the market. The same also has taken place in the United States. Basically, we have relied on other countries, People's Republic of China, Taiwan, South Korea, to produce our chips, the chips that we need for our products. And this means that we really rely on East Asia, at least part of East Asia, China, Taiwan, South Korea, or Japan. And you know how important and how relevant is now situation between China or Taiwan. We'll speak about it in a few minutes. And here it is. Taiwan is considered by People's Republic of China as a separate province, and in China expects to take back Taiwan. So the tension between China, mainland, and Taiwan has been growing during the last years, and we are scared about a possible war between China and Taiwan. Somebody says that possibly the relevance of TSMC and of a silicon ecosystem in Taiwan may shield it from Chinese invasion. We'll see if Taiwan will remain less connected to China as it is now in the next years, even though some war winds are blowing in the Formosa Strait. What about Europe? Europe is doing well in the solid heritage technologies. Here you see technologies with minimum feature size, quite relaxed. But if we look at the production in terms of millions of wafers per month, we are doing not well. And please take into account that these companies producing advanced chips are located in Ireland, Intel, and in Germany, Global Foundries, but we are American companies, actually, not European. So we are solid in conventional manufacturing, but we have a strong, dramatic delay in advanced technologies. And this has led to some political choices. And 14 August 2018, Trump administration issued the first ban to US agencies from using systems, equipment, and services from Huawei because they suspected that the company was aiding the Chinese government in espionage activity. And 3 years later, Thierry Breton stated what we read at the beginning of my talk. And it is stated here. And now we're speaking about reshoring, friendshoring, decoupling, de-risking, taking back some of the industries that we have placed in Far East, in the Far East countries that dominate the production of chips these days, and bring them to Europe, to the United States, and to some friend shores and in particular to some allies. We are in a war period, and we have started again to speak in terms of allied countries and enemy countries, and this is very dramatic. Responding to these instances, Europe has announced its CHIPS Act on February 8, 2022. The United States have created helpful incentives to produce semiconductor chips for America Act the same year for about 20 to 52 billion US. China is supporting its activity. 300 millimeter fabs are under construction close to Shanghai. Japan is doing the same. Korea is moving in the same way. Every country or group of countries is supporting semiconductor industries because they are understood that it is strategic for technological sovereignty. Let's come back to Europe. 1 year after the announcement by Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, eventually the Commission welcomed the political agreement of European CHIPS Act 14 months. This is, in a sense, a limitation. It's slow, but we know that democracies are, in a sense, slow. It's not so easy to adopt decisions as in case of other countries where democracy is not the regime. And again, we read something, semiconductors at the center of strong geostrategic interests and of global technological race. So, European Union has been responding and focusing on these goals. There are 5 goals that you can read here if you're not already familiar. And the goal of Europe is to take back the market share that we had 24 years ago, going from 10%, 9% to 20% of the global market. And there was an investment really very much relying also on national investment. And in this sense, there's been also competition between European countries, which has led to the establishment of some projects in Germany. The German government has agreed to host an Intel foundry in Magdeburg, and the total budget for this foundry will be around 30 billion euros, and it is, and the support by German government is something around 1/3 of this figure. And Germany played its cards also to attract TSMC, and it is another important investment. It is $11 billion investment for a TSMC chip plant, again close to in a former DDR land. France moved the same way, and they are investing to develop, to improve the production in Troll, which is the center of STMicroelectronics advanced technology production. And also Poland made a big jump and taking the Intel fab for packaging, for advanced packaging. And this was announced on June 2023. So we see that all countries are playing a big role with substantial investment from national and local government to acquire, to bring important foundries, important companies, come back to Europe, but also to open foundries in Arizona, for instance, in the United States, in Japan. And there is a reassessment of a general semiconductor market, and the role of politics is really very important. For this reason, 2 years ago, actually 3 years ago, we started, it is the third year that Professor Burrigan and myself started a new course, a new teaching that we called Microelectronics and Globalization. And it is an experiment that we're running with students of engineering faculty and political science faculty. And we mix them together to, let's say, to try to get two goals. One is to make engineers more aware of the role of importance of political decision, which is nothing new. We have seen that it took place in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s. And it was important. Now it has become even more important in these days of confrontation. On the other hand, the other goal was to give to our political science students, international relations students, some hints, some ideas about the technology, which is nothing which comes down from the sky, but it is made by men, and it is produced by our brain, by our capability, through our ideas. And following the evolution of microelectronics technology from the single transistor 1947 to the 100+ billion transistor chips of these days is important for people, for young people who will have responsibilities in our communities, in our societies, in our governments. This concludes my talk, and let me thank you for your attention and for this presentation.
Thank you very much again for your participation. Very nice and inspiring presentation. I think this historical description was very interesting, and also the new course that you prepared, I think it's quite important for the young scientists. So let's check the chat for questions. I think we have some questions already. Very informative talk. May I please ask you the countries involved in the extraction of silicon from raw materials and major silicon wafers producers in the world?
Yes. Well, in this sense, Europe is not so badly placed because we have an important company producing silicon wafers, and it is a German-based company, but there are also Japanese and Korean companies. So the silicon production for the semiconductor chip application is, let's say, is shared among different countries. A different history comes if we talk about silicon used for solar cells, where production is dominated by People's Republic of China companies.
Okay, thank you. Another question, a very big question. So, there is a competition in advanced technology development among big powers in the world. Politics have played an increasing role. Okay. But according to the applicant, we need more collaboration to achieve technological advancements. So how do you think the government and the research community should behave in such a situation for creating a more friendly and supportive environment? What are the barriers?
Oh, well, that's a very complex question. And the answer is, in a sense, it is a political answer, because we need to understand what are the goals of the different countries. And I think that the different countries have understood that it is fundamental to acquire technological capabilities. Okay, if it is shared, it's wonderful. And this is what happens even today. The limitations come mainly from the most advanced chips. NVIDIA, the most advanced NVIDIA chips for artificial intelligence cannot be exported to China. The confrontation is between China and United States and its allies. And in these days, the confrontation is very strong because there is a strong competition to get to become the first power worldwide. What is the most important power? We have been under the American umbrella for years, for decades. After the end of Soviet Union, an historian, Francis Fukuyama, spoke about and wrote about the end of history. Now we see that the history has not ended, and there are about 20 wars running across the world. We know in Europe about Ukraine and the Israel-Hamas war and Iran now, but there are many other wars going ahead. And this is a confrontation. Pope Francis said that we are already in the midst of a third world war, which is not fought openly, but it's divided in several countries. So, first of all, we need to share common goals, common political goals, common interests, and then we can share also policies about semiconductors, about machines, about technologies, about design tools. And but I think that before reaching a positive evolution of the technology development, we must reach a political agreement between countries, which means by now, United States, Western Bloc, China, Russia, and then their allies. And this is very difficult. This is really very difficult. I hope that we'll not be facing other wars in the next future, but okay, we have touched the top of a crisis, and then reasonable people can start talking together.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any other question from the audience? Meantime, I have a question about the EU CHIPS Act initiative. So, do you believe that this initiative is sufficient for achieving, let's say, EU resilience, or we need more support from the EU countries and governments?
Well, Konstantinos, we are now at about 9% of the market share. It is believed that the market will double in at the beginning of the 30s. So we need to increase our production by a factor of not of 2, but perhaps 3 or 4, which means big investment. But when we move, we are eventually moving, also the other countries are moving. And the United States are moving, and they are attracting very much companies to invest there, and Japan and South Korea, and they are putting a lot of money. I hope that, I really wish that Europe will be able to regain some of the positions, even though there are some bottlenecks. And the bottleneck at present, one of the most important bottlenecks at present is the lack of manpower, because we're lacking STEM graduates, engineers, physicists, and chemists. And this is really a product that we're literally missing. But this is something that also United States is experiencing, and even Taiwan, even China. So developing and trying to increase the local production is a strategic goal for all governments, for their sustainability of the industries, but it is facing some bottlenecks, which is not easy to cope with. And in Italy, the number of graduated in electronic engineers is more or less stable, perhaps slightly declining over the years, but there is no jump, even though the requests from the companies, from the market are very high.
Okay, thank you very much. I think there's not any other question. So I would like to thank you again for accepting our invitation to participate. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for your invitation.
Okay, you are welcome. Now we will proceed to the final webinar of the day. We have together, I can see already Jens Hauch from FCJ from Germany. Hi, Jens, you can check if you want, if you can share the screen and you check your presentation. We have 5 minutes just to start following the program.
Okay.
Perfect. It's perfect.
Things are working.
I mean, yes, we can see everything very nicely. So we can wait 2 minutes and then I can introduce you in the audience and then we start. Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Okay, let's wait 2 minutes.
All right. Okay. So Jens, thank you very much for accepting our invitation to participate in the school. Actually, you are a member of the MERS consortium. Your group is participating, and actually you are offering the biggest, let's say, pilot line that we have in the consortium for printed electronics. So let me say a few words about the speaker. So Dr. Hauch will speak about automation as a key to accelerate energy materials development. So a few words about Jens. So since 2018, he is the head of the research department in the Helmholtz Institute Erlangen, Nuremberg, for renewable energy in Germany. He was the managing director in the energy campus in Nuremberg in Germany, and also in the company for Narca Technologies, also based in Germany. He received his Bachelor of Science in Physics in the University of Illinois in the USA, and a PhD in Physics from the University of Texas. So thank you again for accepting our invitation. So we have 45 minutes for your presentation, and then up to 15 minutes for questions from the audience. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. So we're going to switch gears a little bit now from politics to material science. Let me point out 3 words in my title, which are really important, and I'm really going to spend a little time justifying that. And that's accelerate materials development, because this is what we really need to do. The reason for that, let me see my slides now. So let's see where we're at. When I mean where we're at, I'm talking actually about global warming and climate change, because this is the biggest challenge that we are really facing in our and your generation. So many of you are a generation younger than me, I assume. So we need to cope with it. Here, this is from the IPCC report. We're at 1.09 degrees C currently, and it does not look like we are really slowing down, to be honest. And this is where we as scientists and as material scientists can help. If we look a little closer, we can identify the reason for this. I think this is fairly uncontested. It's CO2, and it is very clear actually how much of a contribution CO2 is giving to this climate change, and this is all scientifically investigated and documented. So not really, there shouldn't really be many reasons to discuss about it, although politics is contesting all of this. And it's also fairly clear that this is strongly related to energy consumption. So if we look a little closer, where does the CO2 come from? You see that there is a very large gray part in this pie chart. Over here, you see how it actually is distributed between the sectors. And it's very clear our energy demand is one of the primary reasons for the CO2 that we are producing on this planet. And therefore, I believe that the transition to a CO2 neutral energy supply really is the grand challenge of this century. Apart from, of course, solving the political battles that the speaker before me had just referred to. The good news is that we actually do have solutions. So if you look at the IPCC report, which is something that I can recommend to everyone, you can also in very much detail see what we can do and what is the potential for CO2 reduction for different technologies. Now, this is a little small, so I'm enlarging this part up here. And when you look up there, you actually can see that solar energy has the highest potential for reducing CO2 emissions out of all the technological solutions that we have available. So that's good for me as a photovoltaics researcher, but it also means that this is an important subject. But I don't just want to talk about this solution, but what I want to make clear is, apart from solar and wind, of course, having the highest potential for CO2 reduction, also for cost reduction, by the way, I also want to point out that new functional materials are the main drivers for these technologies. This is where things start, with the development of new materials and processes that turn these materials into functional materials to fulfill certain functions. So this is a short introduction. The next question is, what actually is needed to solve this problem? From a materials point of view, we can take on these major technologies that we're looking at. And for silicon, we're talking about semiconductor properties. We need efficiency. We need simple manufacturing processes. That's what we're looking for. But similar things go for wind. We need lightweight materials with high strength that are abrasion resistant, or we need batteries with a high capacity for energy storage, low environmental impact, ideally something that doesn't use rare materials that are hard to come by and that we will run out if we need too much capacity, or we need fuel cell materials. And when we do all this, we shouldn't get lost too much in just physical properties, because one thing that we always need to consider, my advisor told me the most important physical property of a material sometimes is its cost. So we need to pay attention to this as well. We need to find ways to solve these problems with low-cost materials that are abundant, that are available, that are ideally recyclable, because we need a lot of these things. So now we know what we want. Question is, how do we get there, or how long does it take to get there, typically? This is reasonably well known, so there are many technologies that have been developed over the past century or so. Of course, our abilities have changed, but traditionally, if you look at it, a new technology from its discovery to its application in a large-scale commercial product, you're talking about 20, 25 years. That was the case when I was a PhD student, and that still is the case today. You know, there are no firm studies. Here's another example of it. And so there are no real statistics, but the 20 years are something. Then if we look at our calendar, it reads 2024. Many of the goals that we have on our table for tasks that we need to resolve in order to limit climate change. We're looking at solutions that need to be implemented before 2050, way before 2050. 20 years from now is 2045. We can't wait until then to solve things. We need things quicker. So this is my message. Traditional methods, the way we're doing it is too long. So the question is, how can we change things? Changing things isn't so easy because it's not just about materials. So here's a plot that shows you the green revolution going from raw materials all the way to technological solutions in the end. And what you see is that there are many things in between. So we're going from the outside to the inside here. And we're starting with a raw material that we have to turn into a functional material. Then we take this functional material and we somehow turn it into a device which fulfills a certain function. And with that, we can actually start building systems. So wonderful. How do we actually do this? And politics has come up with an answer. And it was actually implemented already more than 10 years ago. So this is not such a new idea. Back then, there was a so-called mission innovation implemented, and in 2015. And in mission innovation, this was opened up by President Obama, and he said, we can do it faster. And I would contest to it. We can't just do it faster. We actually need to do it faster. So we have to accelerate. So from the acceleration part, now let's jump into actual technology development. And since I come from PV, it makes sense for me to start with a small case study of photovoltaics. My case study starts in 1955. 1955, so it was actually quite amazing. Bell Labs, they built this system, which was a module of solar cells together with a battery that could store this. And it was marketed as a solar battery. We don't actually know what the price of this system was, but we're fairly sure it was much larger than $100 per watt. So it was quite innovative and visionary. Not sure how many systems actually sold. From that, we just jumped 25 years into the future, and we see a lot has happened. The technology has matured. We have gone from just single systems or individual systems, maybe with one module, with a very limited size to actually something like 5 megawatt installed worldwide. This is. So 5 megawatts comes out to be about 100,000 modules. And this was a large installation that you're looking at here. Module prices back then, roughly $30 per watt. So a significant decrease from in 25 years, but still pretty high. So fast forward another circa 25 years, in 2004, we had actually entered the gigawatt area from the megawatt era. Now millions of modules installed, individual sites with 10,000s of modules actually. Module price at roughly $3.7 per watt peak. And a levelized cost of energy now at roughly 40 cents per kilowatt hour, which made it pretty interesting because this isn't so far away from the actual energy prices that you pay in other places. Now let's fast forward again. 25 years forward is not possible, but where are we today? We've entered the terawatt age. We have billions of modules. We're approaching a time on this planet where we're going to have more solar modules than we have people on this planet. Very interesting change. We have sites now that contain millions of modules, not just thousands or hundreds of thousands, but millions. And we're approaching electricity prices in production of 1 cent per kilowatt hour. So this is the lowest cost energy source that we have ever had. So how do we get there? A little drier representation of what I just showed you is this chart. And this chart is what we call the learning curve for photovoltaics. It comes from the ITR PV roadmap. This is an industry-driven roadmap, actually mainly put together with from the VDMA, a German Association of Machine and Equipment Builders. And here you see on the one end the average module sales price, so the cost per watt in a module in US dollars that are calculated to be the value of in 2011, and versus the total cumulative shipments. And as you see, we have a fairly nice relationship on a log-log scale. And this relationship, this exponent here is actually what defines then the learning rate in the end of a technology. The important point here is what this does not reflect is time. And while this is a great success story, it's also clear that this took 50 years for silicon PV, for a technology that is now well established, but it's also hitting its technological limits these days. So the question is, where are we going from here? What's next? An answer can be found, for example, in this NREL efficiency chart for photovoltaic technologies. Now, I don't expect that you can really see everything and read every number on here, but you don't have to. Let me just outline a few parts. So you have several trends that you can see in here. And one of them is at the high end of this efficiency chart. Up here, you have the so-called multi-junction technology. So these contain multiple light-absorbing junctions, and these are complex material stacks. This is the high end of photovoltaics. And here we see that we have efficiency increases of roughly 0.7% per year over the last 35 years or so. Below that, we actually have the so-called single junctions. The single junctions are the types of photovoltaic modules that you are mostly used to seeing out there. So what you see in silicon is all single junction technology usually, and this is the driver for this market. And what you see is that these have been developing at roughly 0.5% per year. And actually the most important is that they are hitting the technological limit, efficiency limit, which is a thermodynamical limit as to how much power you can generate in a single junction with this band gap, or with a band gap of silicon, before thermalization energy will stop you. And so this has been developing at 0.5%. And then here is another segment of this chart, which we call the emerging PV technologies, because there's multiple PV technologies that are behind it here. And these efficiencies have been increasing at roughly 1.5% per year, so significantly faster. And they're at the verge of actually overtaking the silicon technology for the single junction efficiencies. And what's even more important, what you're seeing here at this end, these are actually silicon perovskite tandem cells. And these tandem cells actually allow the silicon technology to advance beyond its thermodynamic limit, beyond the so-called Shockley-Queisser limit. And this is what the silicon industry is now hoping for as a solution to increase the efficiency of their technology further. So there's a whole industry that is actually now waiting on these emerging PV technologies in order to give them a chance to keep on innovating and keep on differentiating themselves on efficiency. Here, this my research group actually is very active in solution processed materials in this range. So disordered semiconductors that can be processed from solution, which is where the connection to emerge and printed electronics is, of course. And let me just point out that the perovskite record right now is 26.1%, while the silicon record is at 27.6%. So we're getting quite close to it and overtaking things. But what I want to get at, or let me bring this back here. So now we have new technologies that actually have the potential to enter the market. They have the efficiency potential to become better. They're even needed by another industry. So the question is, how do we get them on this chart? And the thing is, we have a starting point that's probably somewhere here. So from our experience, where maybe cumulative shipments, it's a market that doesn't really exist. So we're maybe in the megawatt area of material that has been produced. Maybe it's been a few megawatts, but that would be covered by this dot. And from a sales price, we're probably right now talking maybe something like $10 per watt peak. So high. And now comes the question, will we ever, with a technology like this, even be competitive to silicon, which is, of course, still falling in price? How do we get into a market with something like that? Certainly, if we just have the same learning rate as silicon, we would just go parallel. We would always be unattractive compared to technology, to silicon. So in order to get into a market, we need to somehow actually accelerate this process and become faster. So I hope I brought across that I think the acceleration is a very important factor here. And now the question is, how do we actually do it? Before that, let me go into this difficulty that I already outlined, briefly touched on earlier, that we need to actually go from a material to an actual functioning device, and later on, of course, to a product. But turning things into products is actually the role of industry. We're technology developers. Anyhow, the challenge that we're facing is actually quite daunting, because it's not that simple to go from a material to a device, or even just getting a certain function into a material. Because advanced functional materials have been getting complexer. So as we went from the Stone Age to Silicon Age, we saw that the materials that we used have gotten more and more complex, both from the composition, so more and more materials were added in there, as well as from the point of view of the processing that's applied. So silicon, for example, requires very complex processing because we need high purity. We cannot contaminate it. So there are many challenging. And as we go to advanced materials, as we add more elements into a material, of course, it becomes more and more complex and more challenging. So this is what we have to deal with, and and making this material is really just part of the task that we have to accomplish. So somewhere we start with intrinsic properties that develop on the scale of atoms and molecules. Yeah, they have intrinsic properties. Then, as we assemble these into a macro scale, as we bring many molecules together, they turn into composites. So we get to the micro scale, and certain functionalities then appear at this micro scale. We need to, and in order to go from maybe 10, if we just have 10 materials and we turn them into composites, we maybe have to investigate thousands of composites. So there's a combinatorial problem that we need to solve here. And then we need to go to layers, at least for the solar cells that we make. They're multi-layer structures, multiple thin films that are stacked on top of each other. Each film has its individual function and purpose in the architecture, and we need to make sure that it retains this. And we need to make sure that all these layers work together and that we don't destroy with this third layer that we put on layer number 2. And there are probably hundreds of thousands of combinations that we can make there, and combinations. And before we get to a product, in the end, we find out that if we want to investigate every possible combination, then we would actually have to look at millions of devices. And that is what's happening. We are making millions of devices in emerging photovoltaics. There are many, many groups around the world that are working on these and trying to find improvements. And this is really the challenge that we're facing, is how do we navigate through this problem of the individual scales, through this problem of the interplay between composition and process and the formation of microstructures, and bring that to a device level. If you look at it, it's starting from the material scale, it's quite complex because there are many, many choices of individual materials that we have. These number of chemical elements that we have that we can choose from is getting larger as more and more of the last one has been discovered in 2017. So our task isn't getting easier. And even if we look at a simple solution process device, we find out that it's a quite complex complex unit. So what I'm showing you here is now actually the first solar cell as a cross section. Before that, you've only seen modules. And what we start with is a substrate that is covered with a transparent electrode. Then in a very simple device, we have either an electron or a hole transport layer. You can start with either one, but we typically start with the electron transport layer. Then comes an active light absorption layer that will take the photons and create charge carriers from these photons. Then we have a hole transport layer. And finally, we finish it with another electrode. And then when light shines in, you will actually get a potential forming between this top and this bottom electrode. Or if you connect the two between each other, there will be a current flowing when light falls in. Our problem is that there's many, many options that we can choose from for each of these layers, or typically this active layer is not just one material, but it's a combination of many materials. Oftentimes they're complex polymers, for example, that we mix together, and we mix 1, 2, 3 different types of polymers together. So you quickly, just trying to optimize this one device, will arrive at 10 to the 6 options. And somehow we need to navigate these options. And then we have things that we can optimize and change, like the thickness, the process conditions we can play with. We can use different solvents and additives. So we are always navigating with what we do experimentally in a super complex, high-dimensional space. And in this space, we typically are looking at our experiments for some sort of optimum. And so then life would be simple if this optimum was simply one number, but it's not even that. So in order to have a successful technology, we actually need to do a multi-parameter optimization. That's what I showed you in the last slide. But we also need to do a multi-target optimization. So if I want to have a successful PV technology, for example, it's not just good enough to have something that is very efficient. But this something or this solar cell that's very efficient, it must also be stable. If you want to have a record, it must be at least stable enough to be certified. So that can be done in a few days to a few weeks. But if you want to have a product, you need something that is stable actually for years. And then apart from that, you also need to have it at a reasonable cost. So it's a multi-dimensional optimization problem with multiple targets that we're trying to fulfill at the same time. And they're all materials driven. So independent of what I use, it all starts with materials. So this is sort of the problem statement that we've been working on, in my case, for over 20 years, to be honest. And just in recent years, we have started, so about the past 5-6 years, we have started actually utilizing automation on a significant scale and artificial intelligence in order to solve these problems. We want to go massively parallel. We want to optimize multiple parameters at once. We want to do it faster with higher precision, and we want to do it with less material consumptions that we've done in the past. So, daunting problem. Luckily, there's a new hope, and it starts with the efficiency chart again. Of course, this is one trend. So there are materials that actually increase efficiency, so that is good news. But there are further trends that are also quite important. So automation is something, robotics is something that has been becoming less and less costly over the years. So it's becoming cheaper and cheaper to automate, so it makes a lot of sense to include this. Another important trend is that computational power is becoming much, much lower in cost. So we all know this, that our cell phones are getting more and more powerful. And in fact, our cell phones are much more powerful than anything that I had available as a student to do things with. So, but this is good news, because then we can use this computational power in order to solve our problems more quickly, hopefully. Another important point is connectivity. We don't need to do things just in one place, but we can connect knowledge with itself, more or less. We can utilize the knowledge from other places in order to learn from it, in order to gain experience. But this is a complex task because publications, for example, in the field of perovskites, where we're also very active in, at this point in time, I believe you have something like 10,000 publications per year. Nobody, not sure what I'm showing here. So somebody's experimenting in my presentation. Wonderful.
Modify the slides, yeah?
So that's not me. Anyhow, so you can comment my presentation, obviously, as we're live. But connectivity is rising. We can connect the data. And still, this is kind of what's going on in our laboratories in material science. So most material science laboratories consists of highly trained individuals doing quite manual labor that is very repetitive, and that's highly intuitive. It's very intuition driven. We have traditionally really bad reproducibility in material science, and we have terrible transferability. So if we try to transfer a recipe from one laboratory to another, it's always a major task. It's never easy, and there are many, many hidden parameters that we're not aware of. So how do we address this? One thing is we need to sort of we need to reduce the complexity. We need to reduce the space that we're working in. And one ways to do this is computational pre-selection. Computational pre-selection is a tool that's enabled by this computational power, and it allows us to narrow these billions of molecules at least down to maybe hundreds or thousands of molecules that we can then actually investigate. So one important takeaway: use simulation and use it wisely. It can make you faster, it can improve your results, it can get you to where you need to go. Another thing that we need to do is that which we're doing, is that we're going from manual to automated to autonomous materials research and to accelerate. What do I mean by this? Here's a typical experiment that we're doing when we're doing in the lab. So anybody that's a material scientist knows how to do this. So we make a hypothesis, then we generate the materials that we need for this in order to test the hypothesis. We process the stuff, we characterize it, we evaluate it, we modify our hypothesis, and we start over. This is very limited in the way that you can parallelize it. A different way, so automation can help us here. So automated platforms, for example, can help us take this step and perform it faster, perform it more reproducibility, parallelize it. Then we still need the researcher to give a hypothesis, and we need to give an evaluation. The researcher needs to make sure all the materials are there, but the repetitive tasks, for example, the data, the characterization, the measurement, and all this, they can be all executed by an automated platform. And my experience is that automated platforms can do this very well. So this is where automated research can already help to make things faster. But one really important step comes in when we actually go from automated research to autonomous research. What does that mean? Is that we have these automated platforms here. And we maybe have some important research questions, but we actually now harness all the data that we have collected through the automated platforms that we have in databases and maybe that we have from other places. And we utilize artificial intelligence and have the AI actually evaluate the data, utilize a database, form a hypothesis, construct an experiment, get data back, and do this in a cycle such that it actually can autonomously optimize a system, for example. And this is a huge step because this will allow us to focus the researchers on the key questions and then utilize machine learning and artificial intelligence to actually optimize in high-dimensional spaces. Because one of the challenges that we have as people in the 3D world is that any problem that takes us beyond 3 dimensions is for us very difficult to handle. However, machine learning and artificial intelligence doesn't care. It can optimize and find optimal solutions very effectively, even in very high-dimensional parameter spaces. And that's where what we can use it for, and that's how we can pose the questions. And this may sound like it's limiting the researchers to some degree, but it's actually not, because it allows them to ask the right questions. It allows them to utilize and harness the power of these systems and move faster. And we believe that this is actually the key to accelerating research in this century and getting to results faster. So this is a similar thing, robotic systems. We have AI and ML. We have a data layer where we collect our data, and we have researchers that interact with this. And what's important to notice here is that there's a few levels. So we have the level of automation. These are simply pieces of equipment that do the same things over and over in a repetitive manner somehow. Then we need orchestration. So this is the level that we have here. So we have experiments that are suggested, and we have computers that actually tell these setups what they should do and when they should do it. That's orchestration. And then autonomy is the next level above that, where actually decisions are made on which experiment should come next and where should we actually look for another solution in this high-dimensional space. So with this rather lengthy introduction, let me get to a few results and things that we are doing in our laboratories today. So in my research department, we come traditionally from photovoltaics, material science researchers. We have all the domain knowledge that you need in this field. And in the past few years, we've combined it with what I call Lab 4.0 technologies. So robotics, AI, machine learning, databases, fair data. These are things that we've introduced into our research. And now we are using that to develop approaches to actually use this data and navigate complex spaces more quickly and learn with less experiments, with fewer experiments. To do this, we've developed a portfolio of automated processes and infrastructure. And so unfortunately, I did not switch off my phone. Now we have it. So we've developed a portfolio of automated infrastructure that takes us all the way from synthesis through the full device to aging. So what have we introduced here? We have, for example, microwave reactors that allow us to synthesize materials in parallel and automate it. We can do solution formulation at various levels. Here you see platforms for automated pipetting, for example. We can go automatically from the solution to actually a function to a thin layer, and we work with layers usually, and this is what we're using our spin bots for. We've developed a system that you're also seeing in my background here that allows us to make from these layers complete functional devices and then characterize them and go all the way up to actual aging of these devices and accelerated aging tests. So already quite a bit of this development chain is something that we have covered in our labs, and that we're now utilizing in order to perform the science that's required to bring emerging photovoltaics hopefully to a product level sooner. So going in a little deeper, what can we do here? So our biggest piece of equipment is what we call the platform line 1. It is actually driven by a software system. The software system is called Amanda, and this Amanda can actually drive multiple platforms at once. And then what you're seeing over here is a fully integrated platform that can take us then from the solution formulation all the way to the finishing of a device and characterization. And with this, in 2022, for the first time, we actually documented how to do this autonomous device optimization for the first time. So we're quite proud of that. So what do we do at the level of materials, for example? So materials acceleration, here we work with library sizes of hundreds of samples, creating something like thousands of data points. This is still strongly knowledge-based, although here we are now in the process of demonstrating workflows that are integrated with pre-selection in silicon. So here an example of how such a platform works. So this is our Taycan platform, automated 4-channel 4-channel pipetting system with the ability to mix and agitate solutions. And we're using this in order to do actual synthesis in solutions. What you're seeing here is actually a lead-free perovskite synthesis. But we're also using these platforms, as you see on the right side, in order to run parallel synthesis of small-scale molecules. And here we can go from 40 to hundreds of materials that we can actually investigate per week. And yet in a space, when you look at it, in a space of millions of options that you can choose from, 100 molecules per week is not much. It just lets you investigate a very small part of this space in a week. So that's where we actually are in close cooperation and creating closed loops with machine learning specialists, in this case from KIT, Pascal Friedrich here, who has helped us utilize the characterizations that we make, utilize machine learning and dynamic functional theory simulations in order to predict which materials should we actually synthesize next, and therefore helps us funnel this down to the best solution. In this case, for us, the goal was to develop here a better whole transport layer. And what you can see is that we develop multiple molecules that work, that actually go into different efficiency classes. And we actually, and spiroometat was for us the reference material. And we could make a small molecule and develop a small molecule using this synthetic loop that actually gives us the same performance as spiroometat in the same device architecture. So getting above 24% efficiency actually for a single junction. That's a very, very good result. So this is just one example of what we're doing. We're doing this for lead-free perovskite, small molecules, for whole transport layer, for electron transport layers, even for semiconductors. So there are many ways that you can use this, and there's still a lot of focus on this method development. How can we actually utilize these technologies in order to progress faster? Another example, of course, we love devices. Materials are a way to get to devices. So here is how our device platforms actually work, and typically here also we work in batch sizes of hundreds of samples. We use Gaussian process regression and Bayesian optimization in the meantime as standard procedures for us to actually optimize devices. And for the device work, we have developed 2 platforms. So one is our SpinBot platform consisting out of a SCARA robot. Let me see here that you see towards the middle. You have grippers that allow you to manipulate samples. We have a pipetting channel that allows us to manipulate liquids. How do I get rid of the tone here? This is annoying. Sorry. It's nice to see it move. Unfortunately, no idea how to stop it from making that noise. So just bear with me for a second. But here you see the operation of such a system and what it does there. And transport it. Let me stop this because the noise is a little annoying. Amanda, I already introduced to you. What do we have here? Or line 1, actually. Amanda is a control software. It also controls the system I showed you in the previous slide. Line 1 consists of control desk. Then we have the solution preparation stage, thin film processing. We do a photo UV vis characterization of each layer that we produce, put it in a database. We evaporate back electrodes, turn them into devices. We do JV characterization of these devices. And then we can do accelerated testing. How this works is shown in this video, again, with the sound on that I do not know how to get rid of right now. So maybe just bear with me. what you see is similar functions, but as a spin bot, but here together with the characterization, all data that we create goes into the database that we have. Scientists do monitor what's going on, but all steps are automated and do not need any interaction with people anymore. What's behind it? This is the whole platform. So what you see, the visual or the physical manifestations are these automated lines. Then we have a hardware layer where these are located. We have a software layer in between that does all the scheduling, that does readout of sensors, sending all the demands as a computational layer where we can calculate things. We can we have a database where where we place all the results, and we have a device builder that helps actually scientists create their experiments. Then what do we get back? Here's an example of the data sets that we create here. This is every sample has its unique ID. Here's a list of things that were and activities that were performed with the sample. We have an image of the layer. We have an absorption spectrum of the different layers. We have JV curves that we took of the devices. We have stability measurements, and all this is in a database. And this database is actually connected to another system that allows us then to model all these curves. In the meantime, we've collected quite a few samples. This is an old plot. Unfortunately, I missed to update that one. But what you see is that we process several thousands of samples per year here. And in 2023, also at a similar level to 2022, I believe. At this point, we're well beyond 15,000 samples processed, hundreds of thousands of data points with all the metadata that we put into the database, and the ability then to actually form structure property relationships. Here's just a simple variation, different systems, efficiencies that we connect. So we have the ability to connect materials and process information. And this is a natural point where one would want to bring in then, of course, AI in order to improve things. With a look at the time, I'm probably not going to be able to go through all of this. So I'll have to be rather quick, but a few examples of what you can actually do with something like this. So typical photovoltaics experiment that we have done. And we manufactured a number of variations. And what we could then determine from that is by using so-called Gaussian process regression, we could show that from the absorption spectrum, which we measure and which is shown here, we could actually predict a number of the key performance parameters. In this case, what you see in here, so you see all these experiments that were performed, all the KPIs that we typically deal with in PV. Then you have here a training set and a test set. And what we can show with this is that we can actually predict the efficiency. We can predict even better the VOC of a device from these spectra. We can actually then see over here which components that we are looking at are actually having the greatest impact on VOC, either increasing it in this case or decreasing it, similarly for PCE. So we can build structure property relationships using these AI methods. So this is one big finding there that we had from there. We can also then extend this. We can improve it. So this was a one contained experiment, but in the meantime, we have connected it with all the experiments. So we extend the learning, and then we can do transfer learning. We can use spectral modeling. We can in order to improve our results. So all of this is possible when you have such systems. We have demonstrated multi-objective optimization. So here is some work by a PhD student of mine. Tobias Osterrieder, who in this case optimized both efficiency and stability at the same time from a quaternary mixture. And you could see that with relatively few runs of experiments, so this is what you see here, you can actually zoom in on a result. So at this level, there is no further improvement, and we needed 8 cycles. And this is what these systems actually do extremely well. They allow us to actually, this is not multi-objective, this is multi-parameter, sorry, optimization. They allow us to very quickly optimize in this high-dimensional space and find an optimal solution with a very limited amount of experiments. This is actually a 4-dimensional optimization, single objective. Again, here we see 4-dimensional space. Very quickly, we zoom in on the experiment. We get these feature maps out that allow us to determine what is the effect of various parameters, where is the optimum. Also surprising, here we actually tested what result a human researcher came up with and what result the automated system came up with. And Frederick, the PhD student, actually managed to optimize to 13 and 13.4%. Where you get from the ternary mixture, so 3 components, which is where we always suspected would be the optimum, the best result. The artificial intelligence actually didn't care. It wasn't biased. So Phoenix actually found different optima, and the global optimum it didn't find for the binary, but it found for the ternary, but it found it for the binary. So this was unexpected. And it shows that that experimental bias actually has also a lot to do. So with this, let me come to an end, just a few minutes late. A few takeaways for you. I hope that I could convince you that new materials are actually a key factor to reduce CO2, so extremely important. I hope that I convinced you that accelerating what we're doing and changing the ways we're doing is extremely important in order to solve the pressing societal problems that we have faster. We believe, and I hope you as well now, is that automation, data science, materials, machine learning are a path that can make this much, much faster and allow us to actually attribute our resources ways more efficiently. That we can get through very complex parameter spaces with machine learning quite quickly. In the end, we need to realize it doesn't just take one material, it takes a whole value chain to build an industry, but that's something for a different lecture. And anyhow, altogether, we need to accelerate learning, and we need to get these technologies to market quicker. And with this, I thank you for bearing with me, and I hope that I piqued your interest and will be happy to take on questions.
Thank you, Jens, for this very impressive presentation and webinar. There are already some questions in the chat, so let me...
So, Professor, can I ask my question?
Yes, you can ask directly because...
Yeah, nice presentation, Professor. Like, it's new for me. Like, I am wonder to know whether this test have been done in the glow box or outside the outdoor study also can be possible with this instrument.
So
for stability study proposal.
Yes. So the instrument that you're also seeing in the background behind me here is of course inside a glove box. But if I move my head to the side, then in the middle in the background you actually see our spin bots. Those are simply in fume hoods. So we actually are developing all our capabilities such that we can do them both in inert atmosphere, but also in a regular atmosphere. Because what I didn't report on today, but what Konstantinos mentioned in the beginning, we are also quite active in scale up and transferring this to industry relevant process, or what we develop here, these materials developments, we transfer them to industry relevant processing equipment. And this processing equipment always works in a regular atmosphere. So that means we always look at that as well. And there's simple reasoning behind it. On the one hand, of course, we want to know what the ultimate potential is. On the other hand, we want to know how we actually how much of it can we actually realize when processing in realistic conditions. The accelerate, I'm not sure whether you also meant the accelerated aging. Accelerated aging we do at various conditions. We usually, for the solar cells, do this initially in the glove box, just through illumination, intense illumination. First studying light stability as the most key and important functionality. And then if we have materials that are light stable, then we take them and evaluate what what happens when other factors come into play.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the reply and the applicant for the question. There's another one. I'm intrigued by how the alignment of simulation and the experimental results can help bypass the need for various experimental setups. For example, lead-free perovskite devices in theory should show more than 30% PCE, but experimental results are still below 10%. So not very clear, but
yes,
it's actually my question that I am curious to know that the theory always that simulation parts of perovskite or other these type of thin film solar cells are always be reach around 30%. But when these devices like chalcogenide and other lead-free perovskites, when we are really experimentally fabricated, it is only shows like 10% efficiency or below than that. So what is the gap between this simulation and where is we are lacking?
Well, the key point is our simulations are not correct yet. And in the end, experiment is what's really happening. And the simulation is something, though, that can help us understand the experiment. So it's very good for that. It's also, like I showed, very good for maybe identifying trends that we might miss, especially when it comes to new materials. The way, I mean, chemists work with a lot of intuition, but when you have large libraries of different components, there's a large risk also of missing exactly the right combination, and that's what AI then can help us with, is deal with these extremely large libraries or extremely large data sets that we want to use as input, and then somehow screen through or somehow down select those into what are reasonable experiments. And in the end, the experiment, though, is what tells us what the truth is. And then we need to figure out where are the limitations. And this is a lot of work that comes beyond what I have showed here. So I mean, what we're doing here is sort of the optimization of systems to certain parameters. This is done very well. What the AI systems cannot do yet, for example, is to understand what are the failure mechanisms or what are the loss mechanisms that are present, and how do I manage to minimize these losses? Because that's always the game between the theoretical maximum efficiency of something or maximum stability and the actual experiment. Is you need to understand what are the losses, and then you need to find ways to minimize these losses. And this is these are things where we are utilizing simulations, and we are starting to actually utilize artificial intelligence in there, but we're still quite early. So there are many methods that still need to be developed.
Okay.
Okay.
Nice. Thank you for your clarification, Professor. In that, where we are thinking about the scale of the device, in this automation system, why you incorporate with spin coating? But spin coating cannot have future for the scale of the device. You can think something different in that way.
Actually, I mean, so far, 20 years of experience have showed us that we can transfer, if we can develop a process on a spin coater, we can transfer it also to a coating setup. But you are correct, that always takes some work. The reason why we actually went with spin coating is that we want to make many discrete samples. And we want to be able to very freely vary the composition and the manufacturing parameters to map out the space. And we found that in these automated setups, that's easier to do with a spin coater than it is with a doctor blade, which I think you're probably referring to as the alternative. Because in the doctor blade, you always run out of so you have too much connection between your solution and your processing equipment, so you run a lot of risk of cross-contamination. So in the meantime, there are actually companies out there selling solutions. So a spin-off from us, the company Cypress, actually sells these spin bots. And for the spin bot, they actually developed also a doctor blading application for it. So it is possible. We don't have any experience with that yet, so I can't say anything about it. But it certainly looks quite interesting. We may switch to that at some point.
Okay, thank you very much.
This is discussion, but I think we don't have any time more. You can contact directly the speaker for further discussion. So I would like to thank you again, Jens, for this very interesting webinar and your participation in our school. So this is the last session of the day. So we're waiting all of you tomorrow morning again in the next day of the school. Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me. Have a good rest of the day, everyone.
You're welcome. Bye. 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 Bye.